Welcome back to the deep dive. In our last deep dive, we started unpacking Nassim Taleb's really profound concept of the Black Swan.
Right, those events that just seem to come out of nowhere have a massive impact, and then afterwards everyone scrambles to explain them.
Exactly. And today we're peeling back another crucial layer. We're diving into a cognitive bias that, well, it makes us incredibly vulnerable to those black swans. It's called the narrative fallacy.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look at how our minds work, and honestly, sometimes how they work against us in our quest for order and understanding. It can be a bit uncomfortable to confront.
Definitely. So, at its core, the narrative fallacy is our kind of deep-seated human tendency to create these simple stories, coherent
I think
stories.
the deceptively linear ones, yeah.
Right, to explain really complex past events. It's like we're trying to fit all this chaos into a neat little box.
Even when the pieces don't really fit, or we have to, conveniently leave out the messy
The
bits.
inconvenient details.
Exactly. And what's really interesting here, I think, is that this isn't just about like bad storytelling or being overly dramatic.
Yo,
This is fundamentally how our minds try to make sense of a world that is, let's face it, often unpredictable. We crave that sense of order, that clear cause and effect.
we really do.
And that leads us to mistake a really compelling plot for an accurate account. We build these plots, often without even realizing we're doing it. It just makes things feel easier to grasp.
Reduces that cognitive load, provides a sense of understanding, even if it's maybe a false one.
Precisely.
Okay, so our mission today then is to explore how this fallacy, this powerful default mode, when you combine it with hindsight bias.
Which is another potent one.
Oh, yeah. How that combination makes us, frankly, alarmingly blind to the real role of randomness, both in huge successes and, well, devastating failures.
And we'll look at why this leaves us so open, so susceptible to the next black swan, why we always seem caught off guard.
And why we really, really need to cultivate a healthy skepticism, a profound skepticism maybe toward our own explanations.
Towards the stories we're fed, and the neat little narratives we construct ourselves to rationalize the past.
Yeah, this deep dive, it's going to challenge you, the listener, to look beyond the surface, to question those tidy narratives that pop up everywhere, business, history.
Even in your own life, absolutely.
And by doing that, maybe you can start to grasp the underlying complexities, appreciate the true role of chance, and perhaps, just perhaps,
Become a little more resilient, better prepared for the unexpected.
that's the goal. Okay, let's unpack this further. It turns out our brains are, well, they're incredibly talented storytellers.
Yeah.
Almost instinctively.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We just love a good, clear narrative.
We really do. Our minds seem to just crave that cause and effect chain, trying to make sense out of what might just be a jumble of events, like a built-in scriptwriter.
Absolutely. And Daniel Kahneman's work, Thinking Fast and Slow, it just lays this out beautifully.
Such a foundational book.
It really is. He shows that our intuitive system one, that's our fast, automatic, emotional thinking.
The gut reaction.
Right, the gut reaction. It thrives on stories with clear, causally linked elements. It's brilliant at quickly forming coherent interpretations. But here's the catch.
There's always a catch.
This same system one is, in his words, weak in statistical reasoning. So it often overrides the more rational statistical part of our brain system two in favor of a compelling story.
Even if that story is like statistically way off or missing huge chunks of information.
Exactly. It's this deep-seated human impulse to simplify, to connect the dots, even if the connection is tenuous.
So it's not just a preference. It's almost like how our brain is wired by default. We're not just passively taking in information. We're actively, constantly constructing stories to make it all make sense.
Trying to impose order on chaos.
Yeah, it reminds me of that description of the warring states period in ancient China, from Master Sun's Art of War.
Yeah.
When the world seemed totally spinning out of control, immense chaos, violence, uncertainty, what did people do? They sought new ways to understand and thereby, in some sense, control the growing chaos.
They created frameworks, philosophies,
Yeah,
narratives.
exactly. They weren't just observing, they were building these mental models to comprehend, maybe even manage the overwhelming uncertainty. It's that same deep human impulse. We just hate an explanatory vacuum.
That's a fantastic historical parallel.
Yeah.
And connecting this back, this drive to find patterns, to find explanations, it's often satisfied by what Nassim Taleb calls well-sounding maxims.
Ah, yes, the pithy quotes.
Right. Taleb himself in The Black Swan, he specifically cautions against just stuffing one's text with quotations from prominent thinkers.
Why is that? Seems like borrowing wisdom is a good thing.
Well, he argues that these well-sounding maxims force themselves on our gullibility and do not always stand up to empirical tests. They resonate, they feel right, they make intuitive sense because they fit a simple cause and effect story.
But they often lack real-world validity when you actually test them.
Precisely. They offer comfort, maybe a feeling of wisdom, but not necessarily truth. They oversimplify.
And that's where the trap really lies, isn't it? A catchy explanation, a memorable maxim. It's often just so much more appealing than a complex, nuanced truth.
Oh, absolutely. A truth that might take more effort to understand or maybe doesn't fit neatly into our existing beliefs.
It's easier to tweet a quote than to wade through messy data and probabilities. We end up prioritizing that feeling of clarity over actual completeness.
Couldn't agree more. These maxims, they seem profound, useful, but they encourage us to apply these generalized, simplified lessons from very specific situations, often ignoring the critical context.
The unique variables.
Or the massive role of just pure chance, luck, randomness. They give us this false sense of understanding and control, like just follow this rule and you'll be fine.
But complexity rarely bends to simple rules.
Almost never.
And then, okay, once the event has actually happened, the Black Swan has landed, it's suddenly incredibly difficult to remember how uncertain things felt before, isn't it?
Oh, completely. Everything
Yeah.
just seems so obvious in retrospect, so inevitable.
Yeah, we suddenly feel like we, or, other people, should have seen it coming. That phrase gets thrown around a lot.
That's hindsight bias in action.
Yeah.
And it's such a powerful, insidious partner to the narrative fallacy.
Oh, so?
Because it makes us believe that past outcomes were way more predictable than they actually were. It completely warps our perception of past uncertainty.
So we look back and think, oh, yeah, that was bound to happen.
Exactly. And this retrospective inevitability is really problematic because it just erases the true role of randomness. Take Sam Walton's reflection in Made in America about the decline of small independent stores.
Okay, the Walmart founder.
Right. He describes it as absolutely a necessary and inevitable evolution in retailing, as inevitable as the replacement of the buggy by the car.
Sounds logical enough now.
It does now. But that narrative of inevitable evolution, while it gives us a nice coherent explanation, it completely papers over the immense uncertainty, the fierce competition.
The individual choices people were making.
The sheer luck or misfortune involved for thousands of individual shop owners back then. Many were fighting tooth and nail, making incredibly difficult, uncertain decisions every single day. They weren't just passively riding some inevitable wave.
His narrative simplifies a really complex human struggle into this sort of natural, almost mechanical progression.
It does. And the implication is critical.
Which is?
This retrospective inevitability robs us of our ability to truly appreciate randomness. It blinds us to genuine uncertainty. It makes us feel like we live in a predictable world where every effect has a clear cause.
Which leaves us dangerously unprepared for the truly unpredictable future events, the actual black swans.
Because we think everything was inevitable in the past, why would we look for the genuinely unexpected in the future? We stop scanning the horizon.
Right. Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We see how our brains are wired for stories, how hindsight messes with our view of the past. But where does this mental default really, show its teeth? Where does it lead us astray in the real world?
Well, let's zoom in on the world of business. This is where these compelling narratives often dictate perceptions of success and sometimes mask impending failure in a really dramatic way.
We love those stories, don't we? The visionary leader, the flawless execution. We want to believe every success was perfectly planned and carried out.
We absolutely do. But the reality is often just far more chaotic. Messiah.
That heroic narrative is so deeply ingrained, but it's a huge simplification.
It really is. As they point out in How Will You Measure Your Life, strategy isn't some discrete analytical event where a leader just draws up a master plan.
Right, it's not like a blueprint.
No, it's a continuous, diverse, and unruly process. Reality involves constant evolution. The deliberate strategy, what you plan to do, is constantly battling with new emerging opportunities or unforeseen problems for resources and attention.
So it's not a straight line from A to B.
Not at all. It's a winding, often messy path, full of pivots, dead ends, unforeseen challenges, internal fights,
Yeah.
things that get conveniently, airbrushed out of the final success story.
It's those bumps, the conflicts, the near failures that get edited out of the highlight reel when we look back, like Elon Musk's journey.
Oh, perfect example.
The popular narrative often just smooths his struggles into this linear tale of genius, unwavering vision.
Right. But the biography, Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, and the quest for a fantastic future paints a much rougher picture.
Like what?
Well, he was actually pushed out as CEO of X.com by his own investors early on. He described startup life as like eating glass and staring into the abyss. Pretty visceral.
Wow. Yeah, that's not the usual story.
And even within Tesla, huge internal disagreements. Engineers feeling he was an unreasonably demanding, overarching force, constantly pushing for design changes on the Roadster, sometimes just weeks before deadlines, causing delays, friction.
These weren't minor hiccups. These were significant challenges that could have sunk everything.
Absolutely. But in the grand narrative we tell later, they become just character-building moments on the inevitable path to greatness.
Yeah, the struggle makes the eventual victory sweeter in the story.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how many of these successes that seem so obvious now, so inevitable in hindsight, were anything but at the time.
They involved huge risks, defied conventional wisdom.
Both. Or they just benefited from unpredictable luck, random circumstances. These are often the true Black Swan successes, the ones nobody saw coming. But everyone claims they understood perfectly after the fact.
Got any examples?
Sure. Blitzscaling gives us several really striking ones. Companies that flew directly in the face of the prevailing wisdom at the time.
Okay, let's dig into one. The IBM PC example from that book. We look back now and it's like, of course PCs were going to take over. But what was the story then?
That's the key. Back in 1981, the PC market was fragmented, mostly hobbyists, Apple, Commodore. It wasn't seen as a serious business tool.
Not for big companies like IBM's usual customers.
Right. Many thought it was a niche product, too complex. So IBM, this giant of mainframe computing, known for its rigid internal processes, even entering this toy market was a massive surprise.
A huge strategic shift for them.
But the real Black Swan wasn't just them entering. It was the scale of the success. Selling 750,000 units in a year, powered by Intel's 8088 chip. It completely shattered every market forecast. It transformed the industry overnight.
So the narrative before was cautious, skeptical. The narrative after instantly became inevitable revolution.
Exactly. But the path there wasn't clear at all. It relied on this almost accidental pairing of Intel's chip, which wasn't even their top chip at the time, with IBM's project team down in Florida. Finding that welcoming attitude in Don Estridge, the project leader, a confluence of unlikely events.
And it wasn't just IBM, right? This pattern repeats.
Oh, yeah. Think about Amazon. Starting an online bookstore when most people didn't think consumers would feel comfortable using credit cards online.
When physical retail was totally dominant.
Totally. Or Google, launching a search engine when most people thought search was a mature commodity, already sewn up by Alta Vista, Yahoo.
Right, who needed another search engine.
Or Facebook, building a social network, when most people believed social networking to be either useless, a market dominated by MySpace, or both.
These were not safe bets.
Not at all. They were bold, often isolated bets against the grain. High-risk, low-probability plays that somehow hit the jackpot and became foundational Black Swans in retrospect.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many potentially great ideas get shot down today simply because they don't fit the current narrative of what's supposed to work?
Because they challenge our assumptions about the market or the tech. How much of what we call genius is actually just persistence, seeing things differently?
And being able to capitalize when an unexpected opportunity pops up that everyone else dismissed?
Could be a lot of it. Liar's Poker gives another great, if slightly darker, example with Salomon Brothers Mortgage Department back in the 80s.
Okay, what happened there?
Well, the prevailing wisdom was that mortgages were not for Wall Street. The business had just taken a beating, seemed like it was dead.
Stay away, right.
Logically, yes. But one trader, Louis Ranieri, he expanded anyway, dived deeper into mortgage-backed securities. The book literally asks, why? Who knows? Perhaps he had a crystal ball, highlighting the sheer uncertainty.
So it wasn't some grand strategic vision, necessarily.
Maybe not, and it gets messier. Later, the book reveals the profitability of this very department was subject to internal manipulation. A senior trader was literally stealing profits from other traders to cover his own huge losses.
Wow. Okay, so the real story behind the financial success was complicated and maybe not entirely legal.
Exactly. And that complexity, that darkness, it gets completely scrubbed from the official heroic narrative, which just focuses on vision and bold moves.
That's a powerful point. These sanitized corporate stories, they might be good for PR, but they obscure the messy reality.
And that makes it harder for future leaders to learn real lessons. They're getting a fable, not the facts.
And it's not just individuals crafting these tales. Entire organizations are masters at it.
Oh, absolutely. Organizations fall prey to the narrative fallacy all the time, creating these self-serving histories. Again, Liar's Poker mentions Salomon Brothers' own official history book.
Salomon Brothers advanced to leadership.
That's the one. Described as a selective history with the sole purpose the glorification of the people on top. A ridiculous cover-up job, basically.
What did it leave out?
Oh, the firm's dark past and present. Intense internal power struggles, talented people leaving because they disagreed with the direction, reckless behavior that actually shaped its trajectory, none of that made the cut.
Convenient.
Very. Similarly, in Den of Thieves, about the insider trading scandals of the 80s, after the initial bomb dropped, Michael Milken was carefully cast as the innocent victim of the despicable Bosieski.
Ivan Boresky being the guy who implicated him.
Right. Milken was suddenly portrayed as a genius, a treasure, a savior of the American economy. It was a deliberate PR posture.
A crafted narrative.
Totally. A narrative lawyers privately warned might need reconsidered as facts and the case unfolded. It was a battle of stories, not just a search for truth.
So these narratives aren't just explanations after the fact. They're active tools for image management, shaping perception.
Which is a sobering thought. History isn't always written by the victors. Sometimes it's written by the best storytellers or those with the biggest PR budget. Makes you deeply skeptical of official histories.
Definitely. Now, the narrative fallacy isn't just about explaining success, right? It's also deeply involved in how we fail to see failure coming.
Yes, absolutely. Because our established stories, the narratives we've already bought into, they can prevent us from acknowledging a dangerous reality. We get locked in.
Locked into trajectories.
Exactly. Strategic flexibility talks about this, how a firm's failure to adapt to changing conditions may result from strategies adopted years or even decades before it experiences calamity.
Wow, decades before.
Yeah. Organizations get locked into trajectories that deeply influence their decisions. Even when managers are aware of changes in the environment, they often tend to respond only slowly.
Why? Because it doesn't fit the existing narrative.
Precisely. It's like a ship stubbornly following its charted course, even as storm clouds gather, because the captain or the company culture has convinced everyone that the original plan is the only way. Deviating is unthinkable.
That's chilling. How a compelling story, even a false one, can just override clear evidence and lead straight to disaster. It's like wearing blinders.
It is, and the story itself reinforces the blinders, filtering out anything that doesn't fit.
What gives these narratives such power to blind us, even to undeniable facts?
That's the million-dollar question. And the Enron scandal, detailed in The Smartest Guys in the Room, is just a tragic textbook example.
Okay, walk us through it.
Enron's board remained utterly sanguine about the CFO's role. That was Andrew Fastow, despite his incredibly unusual and complex off-balance sheet deals, these special purpose entities.
The LGM partnerships and things like that.
Right. The board was getting updates that seemed only to reinforce their sense that Fastow was engaged in selfless behavior. They built this narrative of him being a financial wizard, skillfully managing risk for the company.
A selfless hero narrative.
Exactly. And that narrative blinded them, even as red flags popped up all over the place.
Like what kind of red flags?
Massive undisclosed debts hidden in those partnerships. Fastow's blatant conflicts of interest, he was personally profiting from these deals. There was even an internal tracking account showing one key deal would lose Enron $1 billion.
$1 billion. And the board didn't see it?
The loss was never reflected on the balance sheet because it didn't fit the success story. This collective buy-in to a positive but totally false narrative about Fastow let them ignore mounting evidence. Until the whole thing imploded. The story was literally more powerful than the numbers.
Wow. This also connects to that idea, that common narrative that the best product always wins.
Ah, yes, the meritocracy myth in the market.
It's a comforting story, isn't it? That quality and innovation guarantee victory. But is it actually true?
Often, no. It's a narrative we like, but the market doesn't always cooperate. Steve Jobs himself, according to his biography, felt profound dismay about this.
Really? The ultimate product guy.
Yeah. He felt Apple's products were clearly more innovative, imaginative, elegant in execution, and brilliant in design. But they sometimes lost out. He pointed to Microsoft, saying they created a crudely copied series of products, yet they would end up winning the war of operating systems.
It must have driven him crazy.
It apparently did. It clashed directly with his core narrative about the power of superior design and user experience. The market, in his view, wasn't playing by the right rules, wasn't validating his story.
So it really challenges that simple quality-driven narrative. It shows that market dynamics, distribution, alliances, timing.
Network effects, all sorts of other factors can be way more decisive than just having the best product by some technical definition.
Bill Gates's perspective, also mentioned in the Jobs bio, kind of touches on this, right? His idea that open will succeed in the long run.
Exactly. Gates argued that Apple's coherence thing, their closed ecosystem, while maybe more elegant, ultimately couldn't sustain itself against an open platform. He felt a closed strategy limits volume, limits third-party innovation, and ultimately market share.
So different narratives about what winning even means and how you achieve it. It's a complex beast, the market.
Definitely. And even highly innovative companies that do create great products, can get trapped by their own internal narratives. They fail to embrace the next big thing.
This is the innovator's dilemma territory.
Precisely. Clayton Christensen's core idea. People who invent something are usually the last ones to see past it.
Why is that?
Because large, successful companies often struggle to pursue disruptive technologies, especially when they first appear in small emerging markets.
Because those markets don't look profitable enough initially.
Exactly. They don't solve the growth problems of big companies. The internal narrative, the whole incentive structure, is geared towards serving the existing large, profitable customers. It's incredibly hard to justify diverting resources to something small, unproven, that might even eat into your current business.
So even when they see the new thing, the existing story, the existing business model prevents them from acting.
Right. It creates this organizational blindness. Think about Amazon's Shop the Web feature.
What was that?
It was designed to show products from other retailers right there on Amazon, potentially making Amazon the universal starting point for all online shopping. A huge potential innovation.
Sounds powerful. What happened?
It faced total tissue rejection internally. Many Amazon execs hated the fact that customers were leaving their site, even if it was to buy something elsewhere via Amazon's portal.
They couldn't get past the idea of keeping customers on their pages.
Exactly. The deeply ingrained internal narrative of customer retention on Amazon.com was more powerful than the potentially game-changing narrative of becoming the gateway to all e-commerce. So the feature had a quiet death. Their existing story blinded them to a bigger one.
Wow. Okay, this brings us to maybe the most dangerous form of the narrative fallacy, when these widely accepted stories mask massive systemic risks.
Yes, the great blind spot, the kind that leads to system-wide black swans.
Like the 2008 financial crisis.
The Big Short illustrates this perfectly. You had a few contrarians like Michael Burry betting heavily that subprime mortgage bonds were structured to go bad. They saw the rot.
But the rest of the market.
The broader market, and especially the big, supposedly safe institutions like AIG, they just kept selling complex derivatives like credit default swaps, no money down and no questions asked.
Why? What was the narrative?
The prevailing narrative was one of financial stability, that these complex instruments spread risk effectively, that housing prices only ever went up, that AAA-rated bonds were rock solid.
A story everyone wanted to believe.
Absolutely. It completely obscured the colossal underlying risk. This collective narrative allowed these toxic assets to be traded everywhere until the whole house of cards collapsed. It materialized as a black swan for almost the entire global financial system.
So it wasn't just individual bad judgment. It was a shared collective narrative that created this enormous blind spot.
Driven by easy profits, complexity nobody truly understood, and a refusal to question the prevailing story. The story itself became the biggest risk factor.
Chilling. And this isn't just confined to big finance or corporations, is it? We do this to ourselves in our own lives.
Oh, constantly. The narrative fallacy is just as active in our personal lives. We tell ourselves stories to make sense of things, sure, but also often to avoid responsibility, or just to simplify our own complex journeys.
Stories that make us feel better confirm our biases.
Or even stories that let us off the hook. Stephen Covey, in The 7 Habits, he critiques what he calls the personality ethic. It's the focus on quick fixes, techniques, positive thinking, offering entertaining stories mingled with platitudes that suggest easy solutions to deep, character-based problems. It's a narrative of easy change.
Rather than digging into the harder stuff.
Exactly. He also points out how our language reveals our narratives. Using reactive language like, there's nothing I can do, or I can't help it, or he makes me so mad.
What does that language signal?
It reflects a paradigm of determinism. It's a story where we have no agency. It serves to absolve them of responsibility by shifting the cause, the blame, outside ourselves. We construct a narrative where we're victims, not actors.
It effectively strips away our choice, our power. We become passive characters in our own story.
Right. And it runs counter to that profound insight from Viktor Frankl, which Covey also highlights. Between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose.
That space to choose our response.
Yes. The deterministic narrative tries to collapse that space. It says the stimulus dictates the response. The narrative fallacy provides the pre-written script for that response, removing the often uncomfortable burden of genuine choice and personal responsibility.
And this plays out on a bigger stage too, right? In markets, where collective narratives take hold.
Absolutely. John Maynard Keynes gave us the classic description of this years ago in the general theory. He talked about investors playing a beauty contest.
Not literally judging beauty, though.
No. His point was, investors often aren't trying to pick the company with the best fundamental value, the genuinely prettiest face, based on intrinsic worth. Instead, they're trying to anticipate what average opinion expects the average opinion to be.
Wow, okay, so it's a metagame. You're not betting on reality. You're betting on what other people think other people will think.
Exactly. It's layers of psychology. What story do I think will catch on? What narrative will drive prices up, regardless of the underlying business? It's driven by shifting sentiment, not necessarily reality.
So if everyone starts telling the same story about a hot stock or the next big trend,
It feels safer to jump on board, right? Even if your own analysis whispers caution,
it leads straight to herd behavior, following the crowd.
which creates speculative bubbles and subsequent panics. Howard Marks describes this perfectly in The Most Important Thing Illuminated, how market psychology swings wildly from optimism to pessimism, from credulousness to skepticism, from fear of missing opportunity to fear of losing money.
A roller coaster driven entirely by collective narrative, often detached from actual value.
And Keynes argued this makes investment based on genuine long-term expectation so difficult as to be scarcely practicable. It requires more laborious days and run greater risks than just riding the popular narrative wave.
Which explains why short-term, story-driven speculation often dominates over patient, fundamental analysis.
Even when it's not socially advantageous or economically sound in the long run, the narrative of quick, easy gains is just more compelling than the story of slow, steady, hard work. The easy story wins again.
And these powerful narratives don't just sway markets. They shape public opinion and can lead to really problematic societal policies.
Definitely. When a particular story captures the public imagination, it can be incredibly hard to dislodge, even with solid facts or careful analysis.
Got an example?
Friedrich Hayek, writing in The Road to Serfdom, worried about this exact thing. He expressed concern that public opinion, especially during tough times like the Depression, could be unduly influenced by simplistic economic critiques.
Leading people to demand.
To feel free to propose all manner of utopian solutions that might sound good, might fit a compelling narrative of fixing things quickly, but that a serious study of economics would show were infeasible or even harmful. A flawed story, driven by emotion, can lead to bad policy.
And Milton Friedman, in Capitalism and Freedom, he challenged another common narrative, right? The simple story of pure free market competition.
Yes. He pointed out that often the most important source of monopoly power has been government assistance, direct and indirect, things like licenses, tariffs, regulations.
So the narrative of unfettered markets often conveniently ignores the role government plays in shaping those very markets.
Exactly. It shows how even our basic narratives about how the economy works can overlook significant external factors, simplifying a much more complex reality.
And even history itself isn't immune. Events long past get reshaped by narrative.
For sure. Think about the extinction of the Neanderthals. The common story, as laid out in Sapiens by Harari.
Is that sapiens were just better, right?
Yeah, the narrative is sapiens were more proficient hunters and gatherers thanks to better technology and superior social skills, so they multiplied and spread. The less resourceful Neanderthals slowly died out.
Sounds plausible. Clear cause and effect.
It's a coherent story. But Harari is quick to remind us it's still largely a speculative reconstruction. We've shaped limited evidence into an understandable narrative. Superior species wins. But the actual history was likely far messier, more complex, maybe involving interbreeding, climate change, disease. We don't really know for sure. We just prefer the simpler story.
Okay, so if this narrative fallacy is our default mode, if it's so deeply ingrained, what do we do about it? How do we fight back?
Well, the first step is awareness, obviously. But beyond that, the defense has to be conscious, active skepticism, a profound skepticism,
Not just being cynical, but actively questioning.
actively questioning the easy answers, the neat explanations. Howard Marks warns against being a single scenario investor, someone who ignores the fact that many things are possible, oversimplify the task, and need fortuitous outcomes to produce good results.
So true understanding means embracing uncertainty, acknowledging multiple possibilities instead of latching onto one story.
Exactly. It means being inherently suspicious of stories that seem too neat, too simple, too perfect, if it sounds too good or frankly too straightforward to be true.
It probably is. You need that inner voice asking, wait a minute, what's being left out here? What doesn't fit this tidy picture?
That's precisely the mindset. And instead of forcing events into that neat story, we need to lean into the messiness.
Embrace the complexity.
Yes. Acknowledge the multiple factors, the conflicts, the unpredictable human elements, the pure dumb luck that often shapes outcomes. It means accepting ambiguity, even when our brains are screaming for certainty.
There's a great example of this in the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Catherine, the CEO, she forces her team to get past the superficial stories and the blame games.
How does she do that?
Well, at one point, Martin, the head of engineering, he maps out his entire department, what everyone's working on, how projects connect, who's responsible for what, just lays out the complex reality.
Action.
His peers were genuinely amazed, blown away by how much they didn't know and how it all fit together. It shattered their simplistic assumptions about engineering. So providing the messy, factual picture allowed for better decisions.
Exactly. It forced them to grapple with the actual complexity, not just rely on their convenient, often inaccurate narratives about other departments.
And this relates to strategy too, right? Good strategy isn't a simple story.
Not at all. Good strategy, bad strategy emphasizes that good strategy requires coherence. It involves a raft of interrelated, mutually supporting policies. It's complex, integrated.
The opposite of a single, simple narrative.
Totally. And it highlights that leadership itself might best be viewed as the management of meaning and the shaping of interpretations. Leaders need to be incredibly aware of the narratives they are creating and the ones others are buying into.
Because those narratives drive perception and decisions.
Profoundly. Which leads to another key idea for overcoming this: reflexivity.
Reflexivity. What's that?
It's detailed in strategic flexibility. It means leaders need to turn in on themselves to question the basis of new knowledge, to actively seek to unlearn or bypass their own accepted and often taken for granted ways of doing things.
So it's about self-interrogation, challenging your own assumptions.
Yes, deliberately.
Yeah.
Even assumptions based on past successes. It's admitting that what worked before might be irrelevant or even harmful now.
And the opposite is?
Non-reflexive leaders. They just rely on what others have said or on experience developed in another sphere, trusting that what has worked elsewhere will work again, irrespective of changing or different circumstances.
That's thought exactly like the narrative fallacy in action, blindly applying an old story to a new situation.
It's the very essence of it, leading to poor decisions. It's the opposite of adaptive leadership. And it's basically setting yourself up to be blindsided by the next Black Swan.
So it's about stepping back, constantly questioning, not letting past success narratives blind you to new realities. It sounds exhausting.
It can be, but it's also incredibly valuable. And it leads us towards a mindset that's a powerful antidote: the intelligent investor's mindset.
From Benjamin Graham.
Exactly, the intelligent investor. Graham makes this crucial distinction between an investor and a speculator.
How does he define them?
An investor calculates what a stock is worth based on the value of its businesses. They focus on fundamentals, deep analysis, underlying reality.
Okay. And the speculator?
The speculator gambles that a stock will go up in price because somebody else will pay even more for it. They're betting on the narrative, on market sentiment, not on intrinsic value.
So the intelligent investor gets interested in popular growth stocks. When?
Not when they're most popular. Not when everyone's telling a glowing story. They get interested when something goes wrong, when the narrative breaks down.
That contrarian approach. Resisting the herd, resisting the popular story.
Yes, that's essential for finding true value and avoiding those black swan losses that hammer the people who just followed the crowd, bought into the hype narrative.
It's about seeing the world as it actually is, not as we or others are narrating it. That feels like the ultimate defense.
It really is. That mindset directly confronts the narrative fallacy. It forces you to prioritize deep, fundamental analysis over those compelling, but often totally misleading stories the crowd tells. It trains you to see complexity and randomness.
To seek truth over the comfort of a simple story.
And ultimately, to navigate a world full of black swans, a little better.
Okay. So, we've taken a really deep dive today into the narrative fallacy. We looked at its psychological roots, how it distorts our view of success and failure in business, in life.
And how it can mask huge systemic risks, leaving us vulnerable to black swans. It's a fundamental part of how we think, always operating often below our conscious awareness.
That desire for a coherent story is just so powerful, isn't it? Almost seductive.
It is. It's a mental shortcut, and it serves us well sometimes in everyday life. But recognizing the tendency, understanding its downsides, especially when dealing with uncertainty and risk.
That allows us to consciously question the stories we hear, and maybe more importantly, the stories we tell
It
ourselves.
gives us back some agency over our own understanding, rather than just being passively swept along by the dominant narratives.
So, as you, our listener, go about your week, maybe take a moment to ask yourself, what stories are you telling yourself about your past successes, your current challenges, the future you imagine?
Are those stories simplifying things? Maybe editing out the inconvenient bits, the contradictions, the huge role that sheer luck or randomness might have played.
Remember that insight from Stephen Covey? Between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose.
And the narrative fallacy often tries to dictate our response by prepackaging the stimulus into a neat story. So, how might consciously challenging those ingrained stories?
Actively seeking out the messy, nuanced truth. Embracing the role of chance.
How might that open up new possibilities? How might it make you better prepared for whatever unexpected things lie ahead? That's the real power here, pushing past the easy narrative.
We invite you to stay curious, stay critical, and keep digging deeper into this fascinating, complex, and ultimately unpredictable world around you.